Hello and welcome to another episode of The Navy Nurse. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to you all about having a baby in the Navy. I've got a lot of questions about, can you get pregnant when you're in the Navy? What is it like? Are you able to have time with your baby after giving birth? So this video will talk about all things birth related. I printed out the latest instruction that the Navy has concerning pregnant service women. So the instruction is called OPNAV instruction 6000.1 Charlie or 1C, and it is called the Counseling for Pregnant Service Women. So I'll talk about the instruction first, and then I'll do commonly asked questions type of information. So I'll pose the question and then I'll answer the question. And I think this will be really helpful for a lot of you who had these types of questions. So the Counseling for Pregnant Service Women talks about anything required, like physical standards for the pregnant service woman, what types of jobs they're able to do while pregnant. So the first one, it says if any environmental hazards or toxins exist in a service woman's work center as identified by medical and or occupational health, the service woman will be reassigned or duties will be modified. Pregnant service women are exempt from the following: Physical Readiness Program until 6 months after delivery. The Physical Readiness Program is the regular PRT that everyone in the military is expected to do every 6 months. And I talked about that in one of my other videos. Right now it encompasses a cardio portion such as running, biking, swimming, and you have to do push-ups and then sit-ups. So you're exempt from that until 6 months. Obviously, while you're pregnant, you're exempt from it, and then until 6 months after delivery. You're also exempt from deployment until 12 months after delivery. You're exempt from any participation in weapons training, swimming qualifications, drown proofing, or other physical requirements that are hazardous to your birth or to your baby. You're exempt from exposure to chemical or toxic agents and environmental hazards. So an example of that would be any chemical biological warfare training, or if you're in an operational unit, sometimes you are required to go to the gas chamber. You will not have to do that if you're pregnant. You are also exempt from standing at parade rest or attention for longer than 15 minutes. So during the last 3 months, that would be week 28 and beyond of your pregnancy, service women are allowed to rest 20 minutes every 4 hours and are limited to a 40-hour work week, including watches. For example, if you are a nurse working 12-hour shifts, during the end of your pregnancy, you will be reduced to 8-hour work days. So normally what I've seen and what I experienced myself when I was pregnant is towards the end of the pregnancy, you would just do day shift, 8-hour work days, and the whole week would total a 40-hour work week. So when you're pregnant, also your uniform. So you're still expected to wear the uniform properly. So maternity uniforms are mandatory when regular uniforms no longer fit. As an officer, we are required to purchase our own uniforms, but you will be a leader. You will have enlisted service women underneath you. So just know that enlisted service women will be giving a clothing allowance upon the presentation of a pregnancy notification. So if you have enlisted or junior sailors who you are leading or who you are in charge of, just make sure that they go to their local personnel support detachment and they are getting their maternity uniform allowance so that they will be able to pay for their uniforms. But like I said, as officers, we make a little bit more money and we're expected to purchase our own maternity uniforms. Service women with uncomplicated pregnancies should continue to perform an individualized exercise program based on pre-pregnancy activity level and be approved by the OB healthcare provider if there are any known medical or OB complications. So, in other words, if you were active, you should be active if you're in the military. So whatever program you were doing before, if you're a runner, if you're a biker, if you're a swimmer, if you're into yoga, whatever you were doing before pregnancy, you should continue doing that so you can have a healthy pregnancy. This instruction says that pregnant service women should not participate in push-ups or sit-ups. Yeah, I did a lot of push-ups when I was pregnant. So do what you're comfortable with, what your body tells you while you're pregnant, and what is safe for you and your baby. Pregnancy is considered disqualifying for designated flight status personnel. However, a waiver may be requested up to the beginning of the third trimester or the 28th week. Most of Navy nurses won't be in a flight status. However, if you are a flight nurse, for example, and you are in flight status, then this would pertain to you. Pregnant service women less than 20 weeks pregnant assigned shipboard shall not remain on board ship if it is estimated that it will take greater than 6 hours to transport a service woman to a medical treatment facility capable of evaluating and stabilizing OB emergencies. Service women assigned shipboard shall not remain on board beyond the 20th week of pregnancy. So just to recap, if you're pregnant and you're stationed on a ship, 20 weeks of pregnancy and beyond, you'll be expected to go somewhere else. So the Navy will reassign you probably to a clinic or a hospital duty. Before the 20 weeks of pregnancy and you are pregnant, you're still on a ship, you just have to be within 6 hours of a medical treatment facility in case you have any type of OB-related emergency. Service women may not travel overseas after the beginning of the 28th week of pregnancy. So if you're pregnant and you are before 28 weeks of pregnancy, and let's say you have orders to go overseas, then you can travel overseas and you can have your baby wherever you get stationed next. A lot of overseas hospitals have capabilities for you to have a baby. However, if you are over the 28th week of pregnancy and you have orders to go overseas, you will probably be extended where you are currently stationed, or they might just change your orders to someplace in CONUS or in the United States. Okay, post-delivery convalescent leave of 12 weeks or 84 days will normally be granted by the commanding officer upon the advice of the attending physician. So convalescent leave is basically non-chargeable leave. So anybody, whether I have 100 days of leave or 30 days of leave, anybody will get these 12 weeks or 84 days after having a baby. Service women who desire to continue breastfeeding upon return to duty will notify their chain of command at the earliest possible time to allow the command a way to let you breastfeed. So your command wants to support you while breastfeeding, so you just need to let them know so they can facilitate a prompt evaluation of the workplace for any potential hazards. Questions regarding potential workplace hazard issues that are related to breastfeeding service women should be referred to the Navy Occupational Health Program to determine whether any intervention is necessary. So the Navy has gotten really good, in my experience, about supporting women who have just given birth and women who are breastfeeding. If you are at a command who is not supportive of that, then you have this instruction. You have the right to breastfeed while you're a new mom and while you have a new infant at home. So make sure that you get that support after you give birth and you're back at your workplace. Excuse me. When possible, commanding officers shall ensure the availability of a clean, secluded space, which is not a toilet space, with ready access to running water for the purpose of pumping breast milk. The number of breaks needed to express breast milk is greatest when the infant is youngest, then gradually decreases. So for example, when your infant is still young, 15 to 30 minutes every 3 to 4 hours is typically the time that you'll need when you're breastfeeding. Requests to breastfeed infants at work during duty hours should be handled on a case-by-case basis. However, breastfeeding an infant is not a reason for granting excessive time for meals or from work. So the Navy, they do want to give you your time to breastfeed and spend time with your infant, but at the same time, they don't want to give you more time than someone who is not breastfeeding an infant or who does not have a baby at home, because then it wouldn't be fair. Service members with children are required to make arrangements for childcare to cover regular working hours, duty exercises, war, and combat contingency deployment. After delivery, service women will participate in an exercise program as soon as medically authorized to prepare for the physical fitness assessment, that same assessment that I told you that everyone is required to do every 6 months. No later than 6 months after being returned to full duty by the healthcare provider, service women are required to take the PFA, or physical fitness assessment, and conform to the acceptable height and weight standards per this instruction and per the physical readiness instruction. So after you give birth, your medical provider, your OB provider, will say, okay, you are medically ready, you're able to get back into exercising, unless you had a complication during pregnancy or are having post-pregnancy complications, then your time will be extended. But just know whenever your OB provider deems it safe for you to start exercising, then you have 6 months from that time on to get back in shape, be able to wear your uniform properly, and be able to pass a normal Navy PRT, or physical readiness test. So that's the instruction. But I also wanted to do like a question and answer type format so that all or hopefully most of your questions are answered. So, all right, first question. How soon must a service member notify their chain of command of pregnancy? A service member must notify their chain of command no later than 2 weeks after official confirmation of pregnancy by a provider or primary care manager. The servicewoman must notify her chain immediately if the service member is exposed to chemicals or radiation, or where duties could have an impact on the health of the unborn child. Next question, can a service member act as a surrogate or carry a pregnancy for the purpose of giving the child to the custody of another person? The answer is no, we cannot act as a surrogate. How long is a service member deferred from transfer, temporary active duty, or deployment after giving birth? A service member is afforded operational deferment for 12 months after giving birth. A service member is deferred for 6 months if the member has a stillborn infant or loss of a fetus after 20 weeks of gestation, or if you have a neonatal demise, which is an infant death at 0 to 28 days after birth. What if the service member wants to deploy or have a permanent change of station sooner? The service member may elect to terminate their operational deferment early. So if you want to deploy after giving birth, remember you have 12 months from the time you give birth to when you can deploy. But if you want to deploy after giving birth, then you can 6 months after. Okay, what if the service member gives the infant up for adoption? The service member is authorized convalescent leave, but not operational deferment. What if the service member adopts? The service member is authorized 4 months of operational deferment from the date the child is placed in the home. So this only applies to one service member if the service member is married to another service member. So the service member is entitled to 42 days or 6 weeks of primary caregiver leave if they are a dual military couple. So the leave would be granted to the service member with the least operational billet. Secondary caregivers who have adopted are authorized 2 weeks of non-chargeable secondary caregiver leave. And I'll talk about what secondary caregiver leave and who a secondary caregiver is later on. By default, the primary caregiver is the non-military parent if you have if you're not married to dual military. Do military treatment facilities or the Department of Defense provide abortions? Military treatment facilities only provide abortions in cases in which the pregnancy is the result of rape or incest, or when the life of the service member is endangered by carrying the fetus to term. What are the work restrictions or duty limitations for a service member who is pregnant? Limitations indicate members do not require written documentation from their healthcare providers. So those are the ones, so there's some that, you want to keep privacy issues private, right? So the OB doctor can write, okay, the service member is limited per private instructions, right? Your commanding officer, though, by law has to know what is going on, but everyone of your chain of command does not need to know. So work restrictions, normal work restrictions, are the ones that I talked about earlier, that starting that 28th week of pregnancy. You are not allowed to work more than 40 hours a week. There's also a little bit more. So again, starting 28th week of pregnancy, the service member must be allowed to rest a minimum of 20 minutes every 4 hours, must be allowed just a 40-hour work week distributed across a 7-day period. So basically working a normal Monday through Friday 40-hour work week. The service woman must not stand at parade rest or attention longer than 15 minutes, must not work in one position or lay prone or on your belly for longer than 20 minutes, or must not, ever lay prone for a prolonged period, must not lift more than 25 pounds, must not perform prolonged work at heights such as on ladders, must not be exposed to excessive heat or vibration, must not conduct high altitude, which is greater than 10,000 feet activities, no scuba diving or contact sports, is exempt from weapons training, drown proofing, swimming qualifications, diving, and any other physical activities that may threaten the health of the service member and or fetus, and while you're at the 28 weeks and beyond, you are disqualified from flight status. So again, those are all normal 28-week and beyond pregnancy limitations. However, if you are having a complicated pregnancy or have to go on bed rest, then there will be more restrictions that your commanding officer needs to know about, but not everyone in your chain of command needs to know the exact details. Okay, can a pregnant service member engage in physical exercise? Yes, just like I talked about before, the exercise should not exceed the pre-pregnancy activity level. In other words, if the service member was not running 5 miles prior to pregnancy, they should not be doing so during pregnancy. Who is expected to have a family care plan? So first of all, let me just tell you what a family care plan is. A family care plan is a plan stating exactly what you and your husband or you and your wife will do if one of you or both of you are not able to take care of your child. The family care plan is required for single service members with joint or full custody and dual military couples. So if you're single or if you are a dual military couple, then you're expected to have a plan of how your child would be cared for if you and or your husband and or your wife are in a deployable status and you have to deploy at the same time. I will say the Navy takes a lot of care in not doing that. However, needs of the Navy, whatever's happening in the world, missions come first, and you are required to have a family care plan. Okay, will the military do paternity testing in the case of uncertain or disputed paternity? So if you have a Jerry Springer case going on and you don't know who the father is, no, the Navy will not perform paternity testing at the military treatment facility. So if you want to get paternity testing done for your child, then you would have to find just somewhere out in town, not a military treatment facility, and you will have to pay for it out of pocket. The Navy will not pay for that. How long can pregnant service members stay aboard ship? Okay, so a service member may continue to serve aboard a ship until the 20th week of pregnancy while in port or during short underway periods, provided an evacuation capability exists and the time for medical evacuation is less than 6 hours to a treatment facility capable of evaluating and stabilizing obstetric emergencies. This requirement also includes temporary additional duty orders. The 6-hour rule is not intended to allow pregnant service members to operate routinely at sea, but rather to provide the commanding officer flexibility during short underway periods. A service member discovered to be pregnant while underway or deployed should be transferred ashore or to shore as soon as possible, contingent upon the constraints of the ship's location, current mission, next port call, and health of the service member and that of the unborn child or children, etc. A service member may not remain on board past the 20th week of pregnancy. Can a service member request separation due to pregnancy? Yes, a service member can request separation due to pregnancy. However, because pregnancy is a naturally occurring event that is compatible with successful naval service, requests will normally be denied unless it is determined to be in the best interests of the Navy or if the service member demonstrates overriding and compelling factors of personal need which warrant separation. So, in other words, don't go trying to have a baby just to get out of the military, because more often than not, that will not be granted. You will have to stay in the military for the entire term that you commissioned for, but the Navy will separate you if need be, if things are happening and it's not conducive to you or the Navy. Okay. Do service members have to deliver at a military hospital? If obstetric care is provided at the military treatment facility closest to the member's command, the service member must use these OB services. If the military treatment facility does not offer services that the member is seeking, such as home birth services, the service member must first consult with a military obstetric provider for counseling on the risks, benefits, and alternatives, and to understand the extent of Tricare coverage available. So also I want to talk about if you're a male Navy nurse. So if your wife is not in the Navy, it's the same thing. So you would still have to get a military treatment provider to assess your wife, especially if you're overseas. So this is if you want it paid for. Your wife could go anywhere because she's not in the military, but if you go out in town, just know that the military might not pay for a home birth or a birth in a different hospital if you didn't first consult with a military treatment obstetric provider. Okay, what services must the command provide for breastfeeding women? So I already talked about it a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit more depth. Commanding officers must ensure the availability of a private clean room for expressing breast milk. A separate toilet space is unacceptable for breast milk expressions due to sanitary concerns. Commands must ensure breastfeeding service members have ready access to running water for hand washing and pump equipment cleaning within the same room as the lactation room. Service members may store breast milk in an insulated container for up to 24 hours and refrigerated for up to 5 days. Breast milk should be contained and labeled to avoid contamination by other items located in the vicinity. What we would normally do and what I would normally do is just bring a lunch box and put my breast milk inside the lunch box, and you could put it in the same fridge as everyone else as long as it's contained in a plastic bag. How much maternity leave is a service member entitled to? So per the instruction, the birth parent has 6 weeks, 42 days of non-chargeable convalescent leave that begins the day after the service member is discharged from the hospital. These 42 days of convalescent leave are granted upon discharge from the hospital by the healthcare provider. The primary caregiver leave is a 6-week, 42-day non-chargeable leave period executed in one increment for the parent designated with primary responsibility for caring for the birthed or adopted child. By default, the primary caregiver will be the parent who physically gives birth. So you get the 6 weeks, and then you can have another 6 weeks or 42 days to equal 84 days. So the second 42-week period is a period for another convalescent leave. So let me just say this in my own words rather than reading this, because this is kind of confusing. Okay, so let's say you are the primary caregiver. You're the one who physically gave birth. Then you get 42 days of non-chargeable convalescent leave. There's a second convalescent period of 42 days that you get just to be with your child after giving birth. So what you can do is, if you have another caregiver, let's say you gave birth, but your husband, or if your wife, if you are, married to a female, that second caregiver can have 42 days after you. So for example, let's say I'm married to a female. I want my first 42 days, and then she can have the next one. Or if I want to break up my leave period. So let's say I want to have my normal 6-week period, but then I want to go back to work for a little bit, and then I want my next 6 weeks a little bit later. You can break it up like that. This can be really confusing, so if you have questions about that, just message me, email me, and I'll try to clear it up a little bit. But just know that when you give birth, you have a total of 84 days of convalescent leave that you can take all together, or that you can break it up 6 weeks. 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there. And then just know that it depends also on where you're stationed, what your job is, and then the mission, the needs of the Navy. If your command says, we can't break it up at this time, just go ahead and take it all at this time, or it's better if you break it up, then whatever, you have to work with your command. But normally what I've seen is people just take the whole 84 days at once. Okay, moving on. What is a secondary caregiver, and how much leave are they entitled to? So per the new instruction, in recognition that there are diverse families and varying medical circumstances, there is no longer what is traditionally known as paternity leave. It's called secondary caregiver leave. So a secondary caregiver is entitled to 2 weeks or 14 days of non-chargeable leave following a birth. So let's say I'm married and my husband is in the military as well. So I'm dual active military. I physically am the one that gave birth, so I'm going to get the 84 days of leave. But my husband can get a total of 14 days of leave because his wife, I just had a baby. So I hope that clears that up. Okay. Can service members have leave if they adopt? Service members are qualified for 6 weeks or 42 days of primary caregiver leave for having an adoption. So for adopting a baby. How is a service member waived from taking the physical readiness test after childbirth? Pregnancy status is defined from the time of pregnancy confirmation to the end of the 6-month period following maternity leave. Therefore, for most birth events, the service member is not expected to take the physical readiness test until they are 9 months post-delivery. So that's the 12 weeks plus 6 months. And then, does Tricare cover in vitro fertilization, or IVF? Services and supplies related to non-coital reproductive technologies, including but not limited to artificial insemination or assisted reproductive technology procedures, including costs related to donors and semen banks, are not covered. So infertility testing and treatment, including correction of the physical cause of infertility, are covered under this provision. So what that's saying is, if you can't have a baby because of a physical thing that's going on with your body, then the military will pay for anything physical that's going on with your body, but they will not pay for an actual IVF course. So Last question. What assistive reproductive services does Tricare cover? So Tricare will cover some things like diagnosis and treatment for an illness or injury of the male or female reproductive system. This includes correcting any physical cause of infertility. It will cause care for erectile dysfunction if it has a physical cause. And then it will, Tricare will pay for diagnostic services like semen analysis, hormone evaluation, chromosomal studies, immunologic studies, special and sperm function tests, and bacteriologic investigations. But that's it. That's all Tricare will cover. So I know that was a lot of information. I hope that helps those of you who had questions about pregnancy, birth, IVF, leave, physical readiness requirements. That was a lot. But again, if you have any other questions, something that I didn't make clear, or just if you want me to go into more detail, then please email me, hit me up on Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. With that, that's the end of this video. Questions, comments, concerns, please, I'm all for them, and keep giving me your ideas for videos. I love them. Thank you and have a nice day.